Welcome in ACC baseball fans. An exciting week in the ACC as we kind of start to wind down. Tournament teams kind of start to find their place. Bubble teams kind of start to get left out. And then the ACC tournament kind of takes shape. Let's go ahead and jump into it. This is Jake McKeever and Monty Taylor. Monty, we'll go to the game that you were at. UVA sweeping Louisville, kind of ending Louisville's tournament chances a little bit.
Yeah, I think, and the NCAA tournament I think is pretty much gone for Louisville. The question is, can they make up enough ground in the ACC to get into Durham? They're 2 full games behind NC State for that final spot. Pitt's right there in the mix as well, but Pitt and NC State play each other, and I think one of those would need to sweep, and then Louisville would need to have a big weekend against Florida State at home. Just a terrible season. It's quite the collapse in the last 4 to 6 weeks for Louisville, and we've talked about it. You and I have about their lineup really shouldn't have the issues they're having. 3 quality starts from Virginia pitchers after they had struggled in the same time period, and they looked. I mean, Brian Edgington was named ACC Pitcher of the Week. He had been pretty rough since the Miami series in early April, and he shut them down 6 shutout innings on Sunday. It was 6 one-run innings for Connolly early on Saturday, and then Nick Parker, I believe, pitched into I think to the 8th inning on Friday night and only gave up 2 runs. So not a great weekend for Louisville hitting. Basically, I feel like Jack Payton was really the only guy hitting, and he was just hitting singles. There were 3 total extra base hits for Louisville this weekend.
Yet 2-13 in their last 5 SEC series or ACC series since they beat Boston College. Eddie King Jr.'s kind of disappeared out of that lineup a little bit as well, and he's kind of a name that you forget about. Who 6-7 weeks ago he kind of seemed like the catalyst to get everything going. And I think the story for Virginia is they were kind of sliding back. I think that their nightmare scenario of missing the tournament I don't think happens with this series sweep. I think they're solidified in the tournament regardless of what happens with ACC. But again, the way that they've kind of figured it out here was kind of the story for me more than Louisville collapsing. Is Virginia kind of impressed me a ton.
Oh, yeah. I think it was really important for them to get back to who they were. The exam break was critical. When I spoke to Kyle Teal and Griff O'Farrell, they were both and Brian Edgington, they were all very pleased about the break because it allowed them to kind of reset. It allowed Edgington to make some of those adjustments. Like I had just said, Edgington had been pretty rough the last couple weeks, 3 weekends in ACC play. And he was a big reason Virginia was doing so well early on in the season because he had moved into the Friday night role after Nick Parker took that scary injury against Florida State, a liner off the head. But Edgington slid into that role, and Virginia was getting wins Friday night behind stellar pitching performances. And right off the bat, you've got that series win, and that was so critical. So to get him back, keeping that splitter down was something he was stressing was the biggest thing on Sunday. That was the adjustment. The splitter a lot of times was getting too high in the zone during the 3 weekends that he struggled. So getting back, making the adjustment, getting that splitter down in the zone was critical towards getting back on track. So Virginia pitching, it's huge to go with that lineup.
Some other notes too. I know that a win over Radford is never something that really should be celebrated, but Virginia going through their entire non-conference slate. How do you kind of see this team projecting in the tournament? Because they have been so good outside of their ACC slate.
It's so tough to say with this Virginia team because I go back and forth with it. It's a good team, a very good team, but it's one of those teams that it's just kind of hard to figure out exactly where they're going to end up, and they can come in one day and get shelled, and it's not quite the Virginia team you expect. So I think they're sitting solidly at a number 2 spot right now. But they can win, let's say they go to Atlanta this weekend against Georgia Tech and, take 2 of 3 or sweep. And we're talking about them back in the host conversation heading into the ACC tournament. But beyond that, that non-conference strength of schedule is not great, but that doesn't matter. It's still really tough to go undefeated in non-conference play. First time since 2015, since your Texas A&M Aggies in 2015 did it. So even you can only play who's put in front of you. And yes, it does help that traditional in-state teams that are normally pretty good were having off years. We're talking Old Dominion, Liberty, and VCU all kind of having down years. So that probably played a little bit of factor. But at the end of the day, a lot of really good teams, LSU, teams like that, they drop midweek games. So it's a really hard thing to do. And I think it's still impressive, but you do have to remember that strength of schedule is not too great.
It does kind of speak to their depth as a pitching staff. I know kind of watching A&M this year, it's been almost like beating a wall. So it is kind of impressive to see 31-4 at home. I mean, I think that this is a team that has everything in front of them going forward. I mean, if they go in and win the ACC tournament and kind of put it into Georgia Tech's tournament hopes, which again, I think will be easier said than done with how they played against Duke. But, they sit at 9 in the RPI, 2 in the non-conference RPI. So they'll get a little bit of a bump there. But we'll go ahead and jump into the next one. Kind of the surprise of the weekend, Georgia Tech taking 2 of 3 from Duke, and ended up being a rubber match on Sunday. And Duke was a team that everybody had kind of thought had figured it out. They were talking about hosting and stadium aspects and stuff like that. And Georgia Tech kind of came to play and say, hey, maybe kind of quell that. We're still in here to make this tournament.
Yeah, Georgia Tech is a strange team for me because they lost a lot of talent off last year's team, and they've reloaded with some really good hitters, but their pitching is still just like last year. It's still pretty bad, and they haven't quite made up the numbers. Other than the back end of the bullpen, Scary Terry is a pretty great addition for them, but they're an interesting team. But Duke, let's talk a little bit more about Duke. I wrote an article about them last week about how they have kind of defied the odds because they were feeling pretty good heading into the fall with their pitching staff. And, well, at least their starting rotation. They weren't sure how much depth they had, but they came in with Luke Fox and Jonathan Santucci, who were supposed to be their rocks at the top of that lineup, and guys with potential first round stuff for talking draft at some point. And in the fall they lose Luke Fox to Tommy John, so there's one of your big arms gone. And then Santucci only makes 7 starts in ACC play, or getting into ACC play, and then he's out for the year. So they've had to make adjustments. And if you've watched Duke, it's almost like watching the Tampa Bay Rays with an opener, but every night, because their guys don't pitch more than 4 innings ever. You've got Gow, Healy, and Higgins, and I think Higgins was gone after 1.2. I think Andrew Healy went the farthest. I think he went 3.1 innings, maybe. So it ends up they're basically a bullpen team completely from top to bottom, and it has worked for them. But this weekend, Georgia Tech just came out with the hot bats and were able to get 2 wins in Durham.
Yeah, and kind of talking more about Duke, I mean, they do have that opener, which, again, for my personal opinion, is I think you're almost kind of playing with fire there, because as your bullpen gets into it, from an opposing standpoint, you always want to get into that bullpen. And Duke kind of looked like the Duke of old this weekend. They kind of struggled to get that big out, and then also their timely hitting didn't seem to be as timely, as they kind of lost both those games 8-5. They sit at 34-16, and I think that they sit at about 10, but again, they have Miami this weekend, which is not going to be an easy series for them. I think this is one that they're going to look back and kind of kick themselves, because they kind of had the chance to be a top 8 seed. But again, credit to Georgia Tech, which, again, I didn't think that we would be talking about the Georgia Tech resume this late into the season. I thought they were one of the worst teams, especially when they played that series against Georgia. They have Virginia this weekend. They sit at 31-20, 6-14 on the road, which, again, they did just go into Duke and went on the road. So I think that they have a legitimate argument, especially with playing another quality opponent in Virginia, to kind of be a quote-unquote bid stealer coming out of nowhere a little bit these last 2 weekends.
Yeah, absolutely. I almost didn't include. I'm doing a Bubble Watch article every week now, and last week I almost didn't put Georgia Tech on there, and then I looked at the resume and I was like, wait a second, I'm going to put them on here, because I guess everyone but Pitt and Florida State is in the conversation. So Georgia Tech's in there, and then of course the way that this weekend went, Georgia Tech, I think, made the biggest move for the bubble teams because, Notre Dame was playing Akron, and so we'll get to that later. But then Louisville, NC State, they went down. North Carolina did well, but Virginia Tech swept. So Georgia Tech has a big chance in that they're going to, if they can take 2 of 3 from Virginia, that's going to put them in the conversation, especially if they can get a win or 2 in their pool in the ACC tournament.
Yeah, and that Clemson series win at the time almost seemed like nothing, like 2 bottom feeders, but they were the last team to beat Clemson, which again, every week that Clemson kind of gets better, their resume improves a little bit more. So they kind of have some external factors working in their favor. But again, I think that they almost give me NC State vibes from last year, where they almost need to go and win the whole ACC to feel as comfortable as they do, because we've seen kind of how they've done this to ACC teams in the past. But again, I think a step in the right direction was, I mean, they thoroughly dominated Duke in the series. It really wasn't that close at times with Duke, and Duke kind of played their way back into it a little bit. But I came away really impressed with this Georgia Tech squad. Moving on to the next one, Miami taking 2 of 3 from Pitt. They split the first 2 games before Miami ultimately did the rubber match. And the Pitt one, I can't figure this Pitt team out because they almost seem like once a week or once a series, they go out and beat somebody that they're not supposed to. And then the other 2 wins, they kind of fold the tent and get pushed over. But I mean, Miami, with where they sit in their schedule, I think that that's really all they need is 2 of 3 because they're kind of chasing things bigger than themselves.
Well, I wouldn't say Pitt pushed over the other 2 games of the series because they were both 1-run losses. They battled, and Miami needed to dig deep and get those wins. And yeah, this Pitt team, they call themselves Gritzburg. They really shouldn't be anywhere as good as they are in terms of how much trouble they've given teams like this. I mean, they came to Charlottesville and took 2 of 3 from Virginia when Virginia was still undefeated at home, undefeated, like they had won 20 plus home games in a row, and they came in and absolutely handled Virginia. And so this Pitt team is a little weird. They're not going to make the tournament. They are going to be, they might not make the ACC tournament, but they probably will. But they're confusing. But yeah, Miami is going to Miami, and I was almost surprised they did win the series, because when I saw they lost on Saturday, I was like, it's going to be such a Miami thing if they drop this series to Pittsburgh. But they got their 2 of 3. They needed that, and then they've got a huge series with them and Duke, which could determine the ACC Coastal Division title before the ACC tournament, which is big because you get the number 2 seed, since Wake Forest is going to have the number 1 seed as the Atlantic champions.
Yeah, I did kind of get the same vibes from Miami, that this just felt like a series that when Miami would lose, just because in years past they always seem to disappoint. But again, Pitt, I don't know what it is, what they have in the water down there, but they always seem to come out and play once. I think they're going to be a lot better. It was definitely a rebuilding year for Pitt. They lost a ton of seniors last year. And then Miami, that matchup with Duke, I think that the loser of that one might have an outside shot to miss being a host. And the winner, I think, locks in a host. So that one will definitely be a really, really good one. And then, like you said, the Coastal Division as well. But again, I think Pitt being where they are speaks to how bad Florida State and Louisville are this year, more than Pitt kind of playing above themselves. I think that they probably should have been last in the ACC given their talent level. And again, just nightmare seasons for Louisville and Florida State to finish above them. That'll kind of transition into, honestly, the surprise of the weekend was Florida State walking off Wake Forest on Sunday after dropping the first 2. I mean, that was a really good thing to see for a team that really hasn't had a lot to cheer about. I know that they've had Cam Smith, the freshman, who broke their single season home run record. But again, they're missing the tournament for the first time in 40-something years. That one kind of felt really good as a fan to watch Wake kind of lose that game, just because Florida State's been through so much.
Well, I think it wouldn't have been quite as surprising if Florida State had jumped out to a lead and held on. But Florida State came back. It was I think it was 3-0 at the 7th inning stretch, and Florida State was able to come back and win 4-3. I think they scored 3 runs in the 7th and then walked off in the 9th. So one of the things we've talked about is a potential weakness for Wake Forest is that bullpen. And I'm not sure how much of a weakness it is, but because of how dominant they've been in the ACC, it's really hard to tell if that bullpen is really good or if they just haven't been tested. And for the people who think it might be a weakness, they've gotten some evidence this weekend when Florida State's able to score 4 runs unanswered in the late innings after, phenomenal starts by their 3 pitchers, including Seth Keener, I believe, on Sunday with Sean Sullivan. He had a minor injury, from what I understand, so he took the weekend off and will be back for Virginia Tech next weekend. But Wake Forest was expected to sweep, and they looked like they were going to, and then they dropped that. They didn't finish those last 2.5 innings.
I will say this, and this is going to sound really strange given what their record has, but it feels like for about the last month, Wake Forest hasn't been as dominant as they have. They've kind of played some of the bottom tier outside of Boston College, and they really have just kind of won. They really haven't been impressive at all. And again, 10-0 on Friday, that's impressive. But again, 4-3 on Sunday when you really kind of get your depth tested. And the bats, too, is another thing. I think 3 runs against a Florida State Sunday guy is another kind of not red flag. I would say like a pink flag because it's something that could show up later. But to the people that kind of say that Wake Forest hasn't played the gauntlet of an SEC, I mean, the ACC is just about as deep as the SEC this year. And I think Wake Forest has every bit as right to be the number 1 team in the country. And whether that's a blessing or a curse with that, they do have Virginia Tech this weekend, which at the beginning of the year would have been a little bit more marquee of a series. But I think that one's actually going to hurt their RPI a little bit. They sit 2 in the RPI right now.
Yeah, Wake Forest. You're right. They've done everything they're supposed to in terms of a win is a win is a win, but it feels like they're on cruise control, which is going to be a problem when they need to turn that on. We see it in the MLB all the time. You'll have teams like the Dodgers that'll coast to 110 wins, and then they get in the playoffs, and you can't just flip that switch again and get the intensity ready. Whereas teams that have battled to get in the playoffs, they get hot. I mean, you see it in college baseball. Ole Miss had to battle and get lucky and steal a bid, potentially steal a bid, and they get hot and win the whole thing. So you got to worry a little bit about the Wake Forest team. Maybe they've been a little complacent because they've been playing bad teams, and yes, they've done the job, but maybe they're on cruise control, and it's going to be really hard to flip that switch, get into third gear.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Is they kind of just feel like it's not that they don't care that they win, but it's just kind of like they know that they're going to win and they don't really need to try going forward. But again, I think they're going to be the number 1 regardless. I think if they take 2 of 3 from Virginia Tech, which is, as Clemson has kind of shown, it a little bit easier to do, I don't think the ACC tournament matters as much for them.
Right.
Moving forward, this is another one that you were at. You were Mr. ACC this weekend. North Carolina sweeping NC State, 2 teams that were right on the bubble. I think that NC State's bubble kind of popped this weekend.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I see their resumes not too bad even with after the sweep. Their RPI, they're still top 30. Their strength of schedule is top 20. But yeah, that was a backbreaking loss on Thursday night. The game I was at, they were up 5-0 right off the bat. They were up 7-4 and 8-5 late in that game, and North Carolina scored 2 runs in both the 8th and 9th innings to stun NC State and win that game 9-8. And then, of course, we'll get into a little bit more UNC later, but they lost the next 2 games of that series. And I feel for NC State because I really like their starting pitching staff. They've got 4 pretty good starters, but then they have 0 bullpen, and that's what cost them on Thursday night because they had to go to Dominique Fritton, who has been one of their starters on Sunday as a freshman, but with Sam Highfield coming back in, he's kind of become that fireman out of the bullpen, and they just left him out there to just drown, man. It was rough because you're sitting there and you're waiting for Justin Lawson, the closer, the only other kind of reliable arm in that bullpen. And he never came out. And we're sitting there all, in the press box looking at each other like, I guess maybe they're leaving Fritton in for the lefty-lefty matchup, but then they kept him in there even after that. And then that's That cost them.
Yeah, NC State sits at 31-18, but they sit at 10-16 in the ACC, as well as, I mean, this is kind of messed up to say, but they are NC State. They kind of always get screwed by the committee. Um, I do like their weekend arms, but again, they just don't have the bullpen, and I don't think that there's like a 2019 Nationals magic to this team at all. And then moving forward, NC State, I mean, they came out and really impressed me. This is a team that I've wanted to see more from for about 6 weeks, and they finally come out, get a signature sweep of their little brother, and I think it kind
Oh,
of
you
was
mean UNC? You had
yes.
said it. Yeah, NC State.
No, sorry, I was getting
Yeah.
too ahead of myself there. Yep, the baby blue boys. How about that?
Yeah, there you go.
um, and they looked really impressive with just about everything that they did this weekend. I mean, they won Friday night coming, or quote unquote Thursday night coming back, and then the next two games they go out and dominate and kind of show their depth a little bit. And I think that they kind of sit squarely in from a scheduling standpoint. They have at Clemson, which I kind of wonder how much Clemson's going to play, and especially kind of use some of their bullpen arms to kind of test what they do. And Coastal in a midweek, which is again another kind of resume boost as well.
The problem with the Coastal game is they have multiple players that are going to be serving a suspension. I got that note in the press box. They got to choose sometime in the next 5 games when they're going to suspend these players, and it sounds like it was going to be Coastal. So that Coastal game, they might be looking to, with the backups, because obviously the ACC series are more important. But yeah, I had UNC on the bubble coming into the series. I don't think they're on the bubble anymore. And the X factor that I want to talk about is Max Carlson, who was their Friday night starter. He was their ace. He had a really good year last year. Was not good this year. I think he had 2 really good starts against East Carolina early on and Georgia Tech. But outside of that, he was getting roughed up. ERA in the 6s. He gets pulled out. He's coming out of the bullpen. And then Saturday, he gets his shot back in the rotation. What does he do? He goes 7 2/3 and absolutely dominates NC State. I think they had only 3 base runners against him. Just a phenomenal outing. And if he is back, if that is an indication of things moving forward, all of a sudden UNC looks a lot better because they've got that arm back in contention there.
Yeah, and I think another thing too, kind of in terms of external factors, as we talk about with NC State, I think North Carolina is almost like the poster child for the NCAA, where they always kind of get that bump. They just kind of needed them to figure it out, and I think that they definitely got that signature win and figured it out. And then the other big surprise of the weekend, we'll move into Clemson sweeping Virginia Tech and really having a tremendous week, winning 4 straight as well as the Coastal. Billy Armack was named ACC Player of the Week for Clemson, went 11 for 20. That's 550 with 2 home runs, 4 doubles, and 9 RBIs, as well as an over 1,000 slugging percentage. I mean, I think that before we kind of run out of superlatives on Clemson, what is up with this Virginia Tech team? I mean, they seem like they kind of figure it out and they're rolling in the right direction, and then Clemson just kind of kicks them to the curb.
Well, I started off my Friday afternoon. They had the early game for the ACC on Friday afternoon. I think it was 4 o'clock when everyone else was starting at like 6. So I was like, oh, cool. I get to watch. I can focus on one game at a time. And Virginia Tech started out really well. Christian Hackenberg or Drew Hackenberg. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've done the same thing. Drew's the younger one.
yeah. Christian Hackenberg's the football player, his older brother. But Drew Hackenberg was on the mound. He was looking really good. He was kind of cruising there, and Virginia Tech was up 4-1. Jack Hurley was back in the lineup for the first time since the Florida State series when he was injured. That was a big boost. He actually tripled off the poor face of Cam Canarella in that game. But yeah, Canarella was fine. We'll talk about him a little bit more about this series because he's a player that more people need to know about. But Virginia Tech, other than Hackenberg, they have no pitching, and they will leave Hackenberg out there to drown because I guess their philosophy is an ineffective Hackenberg is still better than half the bullpen. I mean, I saw them do that when Virginia went down there. UVA put like 8 on him, and they just left him in there.
They did it against Florida State too, and he kind of figured it out because I think he had allowed 5 through the first 2 innings, and they let him ride. But with Virginia Tech, yeah, they have, I forget his name, but they do have one other pitcher, and then they legitimately don't have a Sunday guy. Not, hey,
They
we
had
don't have a Sunday guy we trust. They do not have a Sunday guy at all.
yeah, they had their plan was supposed to be, Hackenberg, Griffin Green, who's been terrible. And then Anthony, I think his name Arguelles, he was a transfer from Miami. He pitched on
Mhm.
Saturday, so I think he's moved to the Saturday, and then he was bad. And
He
then
was their Friday guy for he was
Florida
been their
State,
Friday.
really,
Yeah, he was the Friday guy for Florida State, and I think the other guy too, Griffin. He was a bullpen guy last year, and he was a mop-up duty guy as well for him,
yeah.
which is almost kind of a shame to see because I think Virginia Tech has arguably one of the best lineups in the country. They just don't have the pitching staff. I mean, Brody None, I think, is one of the best catchers in the country. Jack Hurley, DiMartini, Canizero. I mean, those are two draft guys in there with
Well,
DiMartini
and
and Hurley.
the other freshman, Garrett Michelle at first base, and
Mhm.
I'm trying to remember the shortstop, Clay Grady. They've got, I mean, even though Jack Hurley's going to be gone, you've got a pretty good core of freshmen in that lineup that have been starting all season long for Virginia Tech. So yes, they're on the bubble on the outside right now. I think it's safe to say, and it's going to be a big climb for them to get out of that. I think they're going to miss the tournament, but there's still a lot of stuff to look forward to for next season. Garrett Michelle is leading off for him and hitting bombs at first base. Really good looking player.
Yeah, and now we can kind of transition into the Clemson
Yeah.
superlatives. I mean, what more can you say about this Clemson team? They have proven just about every single person wrong, and they haven't even left doubt in anybody's minds. I mean, this were two Virginia Tech was a team that had a ton to play for. Clemson obviously playing for big stuff, and then Clemson just comes out and dominates the game from the word jump. I mean, they won games coming back. They won games holding leads. They won the slugfest game. I mean, what more can you say about this Clemson team?
Yeah, well, and it's funny that because Friday and Saturday's games are not as Friday's game is not as bad as you think until the later innings. Obviously, we were talking about Virginia Tech was cruising up 4-1 going into the fifth inning, and then Clemson scores 8 runs. But and then the next day they're deadlocked at 4 after 8 innings, and Clemson scores not 5 in the ninth, and then Virginia Tech able to hold off Virginia Tech, who almost came all the way back, and ultimately lost 9-8, but. Yeah, this Clemson team's great. I mean, you just mentioned the ACC Player of the Week, Billy Amack.
Billy Amick.
Billy Amick. He's currently leading the ACC in hitting now. I'm working on an article about how UVA's Griff O'Farrell and Kyle Teal are in the race for it. Now I'm like, man, Billy Amick just kind of screwed up my stuff because he's in front of both of them now. But I wanted to talk about their leadoff guy, Cam Canarella, who is actually, I think, 4th in the ACC or 5th in the ACC in hitting right now. He's a freshman center fielder for them. And everyone's talking about Caden Grice. Obviously, they're talking about Billy Amick today, ACC Player of the Week. They're talking about Will Taylor, the number 3 hitter. But I don't think enough people are talking about that young center fielder who just had another good series. I think he went 7 for 15, had a home run, 2 doubles, looked really, really good. And yeah, sometimes you wonder about the pitching, but yeah, I really like this Clemson team, and this is supposed to be a transition year for them, and they're in the conversation to host.
And they're pitching too. I will say it's not as big of a liability as Virginia Tech's is. It kind of feels more like So that's the thing, is their pitching is just good enough for them. I mean, it keeps them in games. And again, the way that this lineup's been swinging it, they remind me a ton of Ole Miss from last year, where they just kind of seem like really hot. There's nothing about this team that would kind of lead you to believe that they're top 10 in the nation. They just go out and handle their business and really kind of dominate from the word go. And again, like you said, this was supposed to be a transition year for them. And they're just going out and kind of proving everybody wrong, like Virginia Tech did last year. And again, Clemson sits at 35-17, 20-10 on the road, or 20-10 at home, 14-5 on the road. Have North Carolina at home. I think they're pretty much locked into host, regardless of what happens.
Yeah, it's the question now is if they're going to be a top 8 seed.
Which, again, if you would have said that 6-7 weeks ago, you probably would have been laughed out of the country.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty crazy, but yeah, it's a testament to them, and they're the hottest team. I think the hottest team in the country right now.
Yep.
And they just keep winning, and if they keep winning, we're gonna keep talking about them.
Virginia Tech ends at Wake Forest. That's a very tall task. I think they almost have to sweep to feel good about their tournament chances, and then win one or two in the
Imagine
ACC tournament.
Imagine if they swept and still didn't make it, and like it was Wake Forest one blemish on the season, and Virginia Tech still wasn't enough. Yeah, I would think at the very least to even get in the conversation, you'd have to take 2 of 3, but sweeping would be the only way you really feel good about it. But at the same time, Virginia Tech feels like a team that can steal a bid by getting hot in the tournament, the ACC tournament, and then stealing a bid when they shouldn't.
Yeah, they really didn't do bad in the ACC tournament, and the way that the ACC tournament is structured too as well, you almost really don't want to rely on it because you could go 2-1 and be out.
Yep.
Like we saw at
Yeah.
Virginia Tech last year.
Yep. So it's a interesting way that they did it, because I remember how they used to do it. They used to only have 8 teams or 10 teams qualifying. You'd still play like 4 games and then determine, who was the best of the pool play. But then they were like, oh, now we want to invite 12 teams, but then you're playing, 4 pools of 3, so you only play 2 games before a semifinal. But yeah, it's going to be tough. The ACC tournament is just going to be who gets hot, and there are certain teams I think that could get hot, but it's just such a dice roll.
Yeah, the other thing too is, as we learned last year with NC State, it really doesn't matter that much.
Right, unless you win it and get the automatic bid.
That's really the only thing. We'll burn through these last 2 pretty quick. Notre Dame swept Akron. BC had a quick 2-game series with Villanova, swept. BC, I think, is firmly in the tournament. I think they're kind of an outside shot to host. And I think Notre Dame's going to need a ton of help to get off the bowl.
Yeah, Notre Dame played Akron, and I think the total margin of victory was 5 runs. They won 5-2, like 4-3 and 2-1 on a walk-off against a bad Akron team. So, like, Notre Dame's on the bubble, and they're going to need some help. They're going to go to Boston College. These 2 teams are playing each other in the final week. So if Notre Dame can get a series win at Boston College, that's going to boost their chances. But talking about these ACC teams, it's hard to. You would think that it's deep enough to get 9 bids, but if you and I ran down what we've just talked about, I don't think they're going to get to 9 right now. We'll talk about that.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in the next segment.
Yeah, but
I don't know if BC has the facilities to host. I will say that.
Yeah.
I mean, they have a small stadium.
Yeah, that's the question. It would be really cool to have a regional in Boston. But yeah, maybe they could figure out some way to see. Maybe the Red Sox are out of town and they could use Fentanyl.
They are going to have a game at Fenway Park this weekend for the Pete Fritz Classic. I think it's the Saturday game. So, or the Friday game. They're going to be at Fenway.
That's awesome. Yeah, because I'm not sure they do have it, and that might hurt them to host. That's the same situation Duke's going to have an issue with, because the Durham Bulls, where Duke would host a regional, they're in town the weekend of regional. So Duke does not have the facilities to host. That's why they play so many games at Durham. So Boston College could get it could be one of those fun regionals where the number 2 seed is the host.
I wonder if they could set up temporary bleachers, because when I was at Boston College last year, they had like porta potties set up out in left field, and there was no one out there. So
wow,
it was really weird. We'll go through ACC. We'll get the 2 teams out that are not going to make it. Florida State at 20-30, 7-20 in ACC. They're done completely, not making the tournament. Pitt 22-27, 10-15. They're out. Louisville at 9-18 and 29-22. I don't know. I want to believe that they have the talent and they can get hot and win the ACC, but that is the only way I think that they get in. They're completely out. But again, they have the talent to win the ACC, so it's a little bit weird.
Right, that's what's going to be. That's why when people are like, "Well, who's going to get the bids?" and it's like, "Well, there's teams that are out on right now that could get in just by stealing the automatic bid."
Virginia Tech, I think, is another one of those teams. The way that they hit, and especially how the tournament's set up with the depth and everything, They're another one. Um, we'll get the easy ones out too. Wake's going to be in. Clemson's going to be in. Boston College is going to be in. Virginia, Miami, Duke. That's 6 right there. North Carolina makes it 7. Georgia Tech, NC State, Notre Dame. That's where it kind of gets hairy.
Yeah, because originally I thought they might get to that number 9. I thought NC State and Louisville might get their stuff together and sneak in with the 7 that we've already mentioned. But now I'm not sure. Notre Dame needs to win 2 of 3 at Boston College. I'm still not sure if that's going to be enough.
And we won't get too SEC heavy, but again, Georgia, Alabama, Auburn, A&M, they're kind of in the realm with all these ACC teams where they have a quality series win, but they also have some really bad losses that are kind of mixed in there. And there's not enough room for all those teams to make it, unfortunately.
Right. It's really hard to figure out. And I think if the ACC gets 8 in, if they get another team of these 3, which is, I think they should be happy, even though, happy at this point, but also disappointed because they should be getting 9 in every year and pushing for 10. They are not as good as the SEC, but they are right. They should be right there in terms of getting teams into the tournament with the depth they have. They're the second best conference by far in the country, and they should be pushing the conversation. I don't think they're quite doing that right now, but
I think it's the Florida State effect. I think it's them being so bad. I think that if they were a little bit more, Florida State would probably get a nod if they were even halfway close to getting in. But their season's been done for like a month.
And I'm still shocked about that because I actually picked that. I thought their pitching staff was their starting rotation and their pitching staff was going to be a lot better than it was, and then I was 100% wrong.
Yeah, they broke a school record for most runs allowed in a single game that I was present at. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was nuts because they led that game early, big.
Yeah, they were up 5-0. I wrote this big piece about Cam Smith going off, and I had to delete it.
Yeah, that's another thing the talented freshman this conference has. But anyway, yeah, I think Notre Dame, Georgia Tech, and NC State, one of them, if they can just do something in the last weekend, and then the tournament, or if Louisville or Virginia Tech somehow gets hot and steals the automatic bid, if one of those 5 teams does something, that would be fantastic if they can get an 8th team in.
Well, I believe that's all we have the time for. This has been Jake McKeever and Monty Taylor with the ACC recap. We're going to do it again next weekend, as well as kind of preview the tournament, so be on the lookout for that. Be sure to use code CBC15. Get all your home field apparel. Get you 15% off your first order. One more time, this is Jake McKeever and Monty Taylor signing off. See everybody next week.